Good evening and welcome. It is 7 o'clock. This is the October 25th public hearing of the Land Use Commission. The City Code directs this body to hear applications for map and text amendments, special uses, including planned developments, zoning relief, and appeals from the decision of the zoning administrator, as well as to make recommendations regarding the city's long-term planning goals and objectives. Depending on the type of matter, this commission will make either a final determination or send its recommendation to City Council. Ms. Jones, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Aravallo? Commissioner Halleck?
Here.
Commissioner Hugo? Commissioner Johnson?
Here.
Commissioner Linwall?
Here.
Commissioner Medenchev?
Here.
Commissioner Pucktell?
Here.
Commissioner Westerberg?
Here.
Chair Rogers?
Present. So with 7 members present, we do have a quorum. Also present tonight from city staff are Neighborhood and Land Use Planner Megan Jones, Assistant City Attorney Brian George, and Zoning Administrator Melissa Klotz. This is a formal hearing and there are rules that govern our proceedings. Most importantly, only one person speaks at a time, so all testimony may be accurately recorded. Anyone who wishes to address the commission regarding any matter on tonight's agenda will have the opportunity to do so at the appropriate time. Our procedure is to hear from staff on the documents on file and then receive testimony and other evidence from the applicant or appellant. After that, persons wishing to make a statement regarding the matter will have a chance to do so. Any person with a legal interest in property located within the defined notification requirements of the subject property may present evidence, reasonably question witnesses, or seek a continuance of the hearing. When all supporting and opposing testimony and statements have been heard, the applicant or appellant will be given the opportunity for rebuttal or a closing statement. Then the commission will close the record and begin deliberations to consider the standards. The commission will make formal findings of fact based on the testimony and evidence presented, guided by the standards, the commissioner's knowledge of the community, and the recommendations of staff. All testimony is taken under oath. Although we do not apply the strict rules of evidence, please limit your testimony to the proposal as it relates to the standards contained in the zoning ordinance and the corresponding staff memorandum. When testifying, please state your name and address for the record and sign in on the public comment sheet. Our meetings are audio and video recorded. Please make sure that you're at a microphone when asking questions or making statements so that you can be properly recorded. All proceedings are subject to broadcast at a later date. Any matter not concluded at tonight's agenda or at tonight's hearing will be continued to our next regularly scheduled meeting. We do have 2 items on the agenda this evening. I'm just going to take attendance. The first is 1723 Simpson. Is the applicant here? And the other is 2420, 2422 Grant Street. Is the applicant here? All right, thanks. The first item on our agenda is the approval of our meeting minutes from our October 11th, 2023 meeting. I know there are some changes that need to be made, some clarifications that need to be made, but I'm going to ask first if there is a motion for approval of the minutes.
I'll move to approve the minutes.
Moved by Westerberg. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Lindwall. Is there further discussion? Commissioner Lindwall, do you want to start?
Sure. On pages 12 and 13 of the minutes, when we're the discussion of the standards for amendments, I think probably it would be better if it read, Commissioner Lindwall led the review of the standards for amendments, is my first suggestion, because there were obviously, there was discussion. And so all of this text isn't what I had to, my review. Under number 1, and most of these are really kind of for clarity. The last sentence under number 1, I think it would be better to read, large capacity public facing concerts appear to have little to do with the educational mission of the university, and are not consistent with the vision goals of the plan standard, which I think better aligns with what my conversation was. And I know Chair Rogers, you had offered differing views. Under number 2, in the last line, we're talking about the MOU. I think then the standard could be met, would be better than would. And under number 3, kind of starting at the last sentence on page 12, neighbors presented evidence to support their conclusion that property values will be adversely affected through a comparable concert venue analysis, period. And then I would strike the next sentence and say, thus, the standard is not met. Those are my suggestions.
Strike the last sentence?
No, strike the sentence that
These issues do not meet the standard to read thus,
the standard is not met.
standard is not met.
And then the rest of it, I think, reflects the alternate view. Those are my suggestions.
Commissioner Westerberg?
Yeah, I would just say the two last sentences under number 3 and number 4. I think those are not those came as part of the discussion rather than the actual review of the standards themselves. That might be something we would just call out and say, discussion also addressed that what an MOU might be able to do. And again, I think the term that would be is thus might meet the standard as opposed to would. Just to make that clear, given I just reviewed the video again this afternoon, and I just think that the way it's set up here could be misleading.
Okay. Anyone else? Your microphone, please. Yeah.
Maybe this was said, but the last sentence, similarly, the last sentence in item 4 can be met, may be met, might be met,
Could
be met.
I think could be met.
I think my general comment on this section is that it doesn't give the flavor of the actual meeting. And I think that's what is being said here. And I'm not sure how to correct that because there were differing opinions.
I think that's the way it needs to be stated.
Just like
Is
this.
that, others or an alternate opinion was that, and then addressing those issues.
Well, maybe that's how these last sentences should start, an alternative
Yeah.
opinion stated. That
So
would,
that there were two opinions stated.
yeah. Because
during the
the way it
standards.
reads, it's like Commissioner Lindwall said all
Very
this. And
schizophrenic.
that's
Very
the-
schizophrenic.
That's the problem. So I think if you added in those last sentences and all of them actually, something about an alternative opinion was stated.
Right. Is that clear? Okay. Is there anything else? All right, it's been moved and seconded, and there have been edits that have been requested to be made. All those in favor of approval of the minutes from October 11th with the changes that were suggested, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? So 7-0, the motion carries, and the minutes are approved with those changes. At this point, I'm going to move on to the cases we have for this evening. Let me go back to my agenda. And are these both yours, Ms. Klotz? Okay, would you like to read 1723 Simpson into the record, please?
23 ZMJV 0059. Nathan Kipnis, architect of Kipnis Architecture and Planning, submits for a major variation for an 85 square foot addition for Meals on Wheels of Northeastern Illinois. The applicant requests a 0-foot street side yard setback where a 3-foot street side yard setback is required, section 6927, in the B1 Business District. The Land Use Commission is the determining body for this case in accordance with section 63810 of the Evanston Zoning Code.
Thank you. At this point, I'm going to ask anybody who may be speaking to us in the matter of 1723 Simpson be sworn. So if you just raise your right hand at this point. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth throughout the course of these proceedings? Thank you. And if you'd please come up to the lectern and state your name and address for the record.
Nate Kipnis. I live at 1500 Hinman. My office is at 1642 Payne in Evanston.
And I'm Deborah Mack from Meals on Wheels Northeastern Illinois at 1723 Simpson.
Thank you. And if you'd please tell us about your project, Mr. Kipnis.
So this is probably the smallest variance I've ever gone in for, but it is probably the most important one too. Meals on Wheels, and I can let Debbie speak more about this, but, you know, they provide meals for elderly and people in need, and this building, I helped them with a number of years ago, a very small building. It used to be a grocery store, and we converted it for Meals on Wheels, and they right away got way busier than they could handle, and they are in need of a lot of space, not just this small square footage, but they do need refrigeration space very desperately. Actually, I'll let Debbie talk about their need if that's okay.
So we moved into that space June of 2020, mid-pandemic, and as Nate said, quickly have outgrown that building. So we're doing what we can right now to make everything work. But this cooler space would allow us to at least house the prepared meals in what is now the packing area. Currently, they're in a walk-in cooler, which means we have to move all of them out of the way in order to get to the walk-in freezer that is in the back of that. So it is very, very tight. And anyone who walks into the building, and I'd welcome any of you to stop in and see the production any day. You're always welcome. It's just a lot right now. So this is one step that we can do that will alleviate a lot of pressure and allow us to serve a lot more meals. Right now, we do have a waiting list. We've never done this before, and I've always said I don't believe in waiting lists. People have to eat every day, but we just have no choice. There's nowhere else to go. So we're really hopeful that you can help.
So we had looked at where else we could do this. We wanted a second floor. That's just economically not possible. And actually spatially, throwing a stair into this would be very difficult. And then looking at the back to put it in the back of the building, there's electrical that would have to be moved, a huge electrical service. And if we put it into the parking area, that would take out where they park after hours. So really, this is the only good spot. It also gives us the opportunity to improve the aesthetics of the building just a little bit, which we're happy to do. So, and I know there was a other food service that burned, and then you had to pick up. It's like they've taken on like 4 times the intended use of the building. So any bit would help, and this is where we think it makes the most sense.
So what is this is storage space that you're putting in, correct?
Yes, and as Debbie mentioned, right now, the cooler is set up, there's a walk-in cooler to then go to a freezer, and they literally wheel everything in the way of the door to get to the back. Anytime they need anything, they have to pull everything out. So this is a cooler that would obviously take all that out of the way, and it would do much more than what it looks like it would do. It's really an exponential help to do it.
Other questions from commissioners? Commissioner Westerberg?
Just to clarify, the address is listed as Simpson, but the front of the building is on Darrow, is that correct?
Yeah, so this is a side yard variance, and there's already a section of the building that's encroaching into that. We would just be in line with that, so it really wouldn't look out of place, in my opinion. And again, it gives us the opportunity to move some signage, make it look a little better. But yeah, it is listed. Yeah, the address and the front are a little off.
So just clarifying with staff that you do not see that as a problem to have the address on Simpson. I know that there is a door on Darrow, but it directs people to the Simpson entrance, correct?
Correct. My understanding of the history of it is that it was a building that the house next door had added on to their property, so that was why it started out with the Darrow Street. But our front door is facing Simpson. The cooler area would be on the Simpson side. Does that clarify?
It's a somewhat common occurrence where the address does not align with how zoning determines yards. Zoning just looks for what is the most compliant of everything. And in this case, to be the most compliant, the front yard is Darrow. It ultimately doesn't matter as it relates to the address or the storefront itself.
Other question, Commissioner Johnson?
You said you didn't want to take up the parking. Where is the parking?
Yeah.
Which side of the building?
It's on the north side, and I'm not sure this is actually demarcated legally, I don't know, but there's a little spot there that they put the 2 cars in after work. It's just to the north.
And the electrical service you talked about?
Is further to the east on that same side. It's that little niche on the northeast corner of the building.
Where the building sticks out?
It's
East
past
of that?
It's past where the building, like the little corner that,
Like all the way in the, yep, okay.
All right, any other questions? Hearing none, is there anything you'd like to say in summation? I guess I should ask, is there anybody else here who's here to speak to us on 1723 Simpson? And the answer is no. So anything you'd like to say in summation?
no, I just hope we can get this. It's very needed for the community.
Thank you. With that, we will close the record and begin our deliberations. Based on the questions, I don't think there's a lot of discussion to be had on this particular matter. So if anybody want to say anything before I go through the standards?
Oh, just that I think it's a pretty minor variation request, and, having the new section line up with the existing part of the building that already extends to the sidewalk is, I think, a reasonable solution.
All right. There are a series of standards that we must find are met before we can make a determination to approve something. And those standards are in 63812, standards for variations. There are 7 of them. And I'll run through those very quickly here. The requested variation will not have a substantial adverse impact on the use, enjoyment, or property values of adjoining properties. Because of the way this building is situated, they already are infringing upon that side yard, and they're not expanding beyond that in terms of moving closer to the sidewalk. They're moving along the sidewalk. It's a small addition, 85 square feet, which is probably one of the smaller additions we have ever been asked to look at. And we've not heard anything from anybody in the neighborhood feeling that it would impact them greatly, so I believe that standard is met. Number 2, the requested variation is in keeping with the intent of the zoning ordinance. We often see people who are seeking to put additions onto their properties to make them work better for them. In this particular case, we have a feeding program which has kind of maximized out its space, and I feel that one of the things that the zoning ordinance is intent on doing is allowing people to make small accommodations into their properties so that they can better meet the needs of what they need to do on those properties. So that standard is met. The alleged hardship or practical difficulty is peculiar to the property. Again, we talked a little bit about the fact that this lot is kind of a sideways lot, and so it really has a street side yard. And this is where it's being infringed upon, but since there's already a part of the building which sticks out into that area and they are following the line that is created by that already existing portion of the building, I think that they're trying to fit something in a way that makes it work. We heard some discussion about parking spaces and electrical having to be moved if this were located in a different location on the property. So this seems to be the one place that they really are able to expand on this particular property. Number 4, the property owner would suffer a practical hardship, a particular hardship or practical difficulty is distinguished from a mere inconvenience if the strict letter of the regulations were to be carried out. This particular property owner is seeking to put a very small addition onto the property, again, not cutting into any yards any more than the currently. And it seems that this is the basic things that they need in order to make this property work for them. So I believe that standard is met. The purpose of the variation is not based exclusively upon a desire to extract additional income from the property. I didn't ask this, but I'm assuming you're a not-for-profit, and there's no way that they are charging for this space or anything like that. So I believe that standard is met. The alleged difficulty or hardship has not been created by any person having an interest in the property. This building has existed for a while. It was a grocery store in a previous life. But the conditions that we see today are there, and when they're trying to expand them, they're very limited as to what part of the property they can actually expand into. So I believe that standard is met. And number 7, the requested variation requires the least deviation from the applicable regulations among the feasible options identified. Again, going back to the fact that this is about 85 square feet, they're keeping it in line with existing building lines. This seems to be about as minimum as you can get to make usable and practical space for this particular organization. So I believe that standard is met. Is everyone in agreement with my findings on standards? And if so, is there a motion to approve the requested zoning relief?
There's a, there was a condition recommended by staff that the stormwater collected from the addition drains onto the existing roof and not into the public right-of-way, so.
Right, so thank you for bringing that up.
So with that, I will make a motion to approve the major variation request for 1723 Simpson Street, 23 ZMJV-0059, with the additional condition that the stormwater collected from the addition drains onto the existing roof and not onto the public right-of-way.
All right, is there a second?
I'll second.
Moved by Lindwall, seconded by Westerberg. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Halleck? Yes. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Linwall?
Yes,
Commissioner Mudinchev?
Yes.
Commissioner Pucktell?
Yes.
Commissioner Westerberg?
Yes.
Chair Rogers?
Yes, so with a vote of 7-0, the motion carries and the project is approved. Good luck with your project, and you can work with staff on what the next steps will be. Thank you. With that, we will move on to our second case of this evening, which is 2420-2422 Grant Street. And Ms. Klotz, would you like to read that into the record, please?
23 ZMJV-0054. Mark Larson, real estate agent of Baird & Warner, submits for major variations to split one zoning lot into 2 zoning lots in the R1 single-family residential district. The applicant requests a lot size of 6,003 square feet where 7,200 square feet is required, section 6825, and an interior side yard setback of 4 feet where 5 feet is required, section 6828, for 2420 Grant Street. The applicant also requests a lot size of 4,953 square feet where 7,200 square feet is required, section 6825, and a lot width of 33 feet where 35 feet is required for 2422 Grant Street. The Land Use Commission is the determining body for this case in accordance with section 63810 of the Evanston Zoning Code.
Thank you. At this point, I'm going to ask anybody who may be speaking to us on 2422 Grant Street to be sworn. If you just raise your right hand, please. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth throughout the course of these proceedings? Thank you. And Mr. Larson, if you'd like to come up, please, and introduce yourself to us.
Good evening. I'm Mark Larson, real estate broker with Baird & Warner in Evanston. Address 2926 Central Street in Evanston is the office address.
Thank you. If you'd tell us about your project.
Sure. We are seeking to split the lot, which is currently 73 by 150 feet deep, into 2 as originally platted. My client had purchased 2420 around 1969, and that lot is 40 by 150 feet deep, and was in that house for a while, and then I believe around 1976, she purchased the vacant lot next door, and that lot measures 33 by 150 feet deep. There was never a attempt to build across the lot with the exception of a parking pad, in which case we would slice and break it off. And 2422 remained vacant as far as I know for the duration of her owning the property. And the client understands that, or the county has recognized these two parcels pretty much individually by address, 2420 and 2422. She got two separate bills throughout her ownership, and obviously two separate PINs. We'd like to be able to sell them separately because we believe yet there would be a greater value to her in selling them separately than as a combined whole. And most importantly, the lots in that particular area, and that would be pretty much the southeast section of McDaniel and Grant Street, are all relatively small frontages, and that keeping these as originally platted would be in keeping with the character of the neighborhood that's there, as opposed to keeping it as a combined, by action of the ordinance, large lot at 73 feet of frontage by 150 feet deep. It's nearly 11,000 square feet. That would pretty much kick it out of character within that area of Grant Street.
I have a question for staff. Since these lots were separate at one time and have come into common ownership, why are they not able to just be sold separately?
They are two separately platted lots. If approved tonight, then a subdivision is not required. We are here tonight because it is considered one zoning lot. There is a section within the zoning ordinance that says if there are substandard lots that are held in common ownership at any time since 1960, which was when a new zoning ordinance was adopted, that if they together more closely form a compliant lot, then they cannot be separated unless variations are approved for it. So in this case, since on their own, they don't meet the lot sizes, one setback and one lot width, once they were put into that common ownership, it was at that point automatically considered one zoning lot, and whether the owner knew that or not.
Okay, that's what I was just clarifying.
I have another question for staff. Can I ask it?
Yeah.
No. Why is the request for 4 feet side setback on 2420? Currently, there is a house that is at 4 feet.
It is because we changed our own regulations. At the time the house was built, interior side yard setback requirements were based on, they were 10% of the lot width. So it was based on the 35-foot or 40-foot lot width, the compliant lot. So that side yard setback requirement was not 5 feet like it is today. So at the time the house was built compliantly. After that, we changed our regulation. But now, if they're to re-separate those lots, that would need a variation approved.
So it's a kind of a variation for grandfathered condition.
In a way, yes.
Does it mean that in the future, if this building is completely demolished, the next one will be at the 4 feet setback?
No, any additions, new construction, anything like that would need to comply with the 5-foot setback or seek a new variation.
Can I follow up on Matt's question? So to clarify, if dividing the lots would have resulted in 2 compliant lots, then this case would not be coming before us?
Correct.
Got it.
I've got a, maybe it's a comment, but I'm trying to put myself into the shoes of the owner, and I'm thinking, I bought this lot many, many years ago, 2 lots. I knew they were 2 lots. I bought them as 2 lots. They have 2 addresses, and somewhere along the line, the zoning got changed. Maybe I knew about it. Likely they didn't know about it unless they were given a notice. But to all of a sudden find out that what I bought is no longer the case seems to me just absurd, crazy. That's just my comment, I guess. I don't know how when you rezone, when you put something in the zoning, I guess there's no obligation from the city to let those owners know. But man, they bought 2 lots.
In my professional experience, it is an odd regulation, and it is a regulation that staff has flagged for the updated zoning ordinance.
But not into individual owners?
I don't know how we would notify owners of that.
Yeah. And again, I think this regulation goes back to the 1960s
So
zoning
I
ordinance.
was
So
going to
it's
say, I
not
think,
even,
I think it's something that existed, but probably was not common knowledge at the time.
and it probably predates the owner owning either of the lots.
Right.
What's
Based on-
confusing is they bought the lots separately.
Yes.
And in that I don't know,
It's a bizarre
it's bizarre. Yeah.
regulation, and that's why I asked staff to clarify that for us, because you would think that if you bought this as this, you could sell it as that at any point in the future.
Right.
And that's not the way our ordinance currently works.
Seems like a
Yeah.
trap. The zoning trap.
Other questions from commissioners on this particular matter?
Oh, yeah. I have one question, and I don't know if you could show this, but the application states that 4 lots on the block, 4 existing lots on the block are 33 feet wide. Would you mind showing us which ones those are? Or-
I'm not certain about that, but I believe they are towards the west,
Yeah.
closer towards McDaniel.
If you scroll down, I think on the one without the satellite view, that one might be a little easier to sort of tell. You can sort of see the smaller lots.
Yeah, okay, so that's what I thought too. I looked at the graphic and I just wanted to make sure that what I saw was true. So there's a precedent on that block and maybe other blocks for this 33-foot. Okay.
And smaller. I mean, look at the one to the southwest of it.
Yeah. So just a point of clarification, there's no change in the square footage of the lots. You're intending to sell them off in the manner in which they were purchased at the time. So the 40-foot has always been 40 feet, and the 33 has always been 33 feet.
That's correct.
Okay.
And we're not reviewing development plans at this time, correct?
Right.
But we are aware that there may be conditions in the future related, for instance, to the tree. There's a gorgeous tree in the front of the lot. I'm assuming that would take place during any kind of building review, correct?
The new tree preservation ordinance takes effect on June 1st, so it would depend on the timing of submittal of a building permit.
I had a thought on that, and this is neither here nor there. We're not ruling on a potential development, but as regarding the tree goes, I understand, correct me if I'm wrong, that this whole area, a lot of Evanston was an oak forest. And then in the early 1900s, many of the houses were built. I have oak trees that are very close to my house, and I'm pretty sure that the house came after the oak tree. So again, I would talk to an arborist, but it seems to me that because those oak trees are still living and their root system, their horizontal root system was interfered with, there's a way of compensating for I'm just making a comment because a lot of Evanston had this condition where there was an oak tree.
And I don't want us to get too far afield into that, because obviously any proposal that would be for a development on that would have to come to us. They would have to meet all the conditions, everything else, and depending on when it comes, the tree ordinance kicks in, that would be something we would have to take into account as well. All right. I'm going to ask you to have a seat, please, Mr. Larson. I had a couple other people who wanted to speak to us, so I'm going to ask them to come up. I don't know if both of you are speaking, one of you is speaking.
My name is Maida Lamel. I live at 2428 Grant Street.
I'm going to ask you just to pull the microphone down a little bit so it can
Okay.
be.
I'm sorry I didn't have the benefit of the discussion I just heard prior to the meeting, because I would have reviewed the various size lots on the neighboring, on the block around us. I believe that many more are larger than the 33 width. I'm concerned about such a large variation in the zoning requirement, such a large reduction, because to put up houses that will be what I imagine someone will want to charge for the house, judging by other new building, they're going to have to go up. I mean, I know there are height requirements, height limits, but they're going to have to go up. And that is going to impact the sunlight for adjoining houses, and that really concerns me. And I know that the zoning size, you know, the requirement may have changed, but I was under the impression that, being that it was on one tax bill, that it wasn't assumed that it would be two lots, especially that it could be two lots where there would be such a large decrease in the size.
I'm going to interrupt you just for a second, because I thought are there two separate tax bills, or is it one tax bill?
Oh,
Okay.
I
just wanted to clarify that, because that's what I thought he had said, and I wanted to make sure
I had
that
understood that she paid one, that. one
she may have
tax bill.
paid it all at one time, but it would have been,
I
right.
misunderstood. I'm just concerned that it's, and because building on that kind of lot that's that much smaller, where there'll probably be more, you know, walls that go straight up rather than what you often see with a second floor that is smaller, that's a precedent for other lots. And it concerns me that we give into that, and that will happen in other lots in Evanston. I mean, it's not like we're talking about, not in my backyard, I don't want affordable housing. We're not talking about
Right,
that.
right. All right.
Thank you. Do you want to say something?
Sure. I'm Jeff Vestal. I live at 2424 Grant, the second house there. Let me first point out real quick, on the lower street on Noyes, the second one in, that's also an empty lot. It's a double lot house, so it's not like there's a pencil lot there. Just wanted to point that out real quick. I also want to point out that I really like my neighbor, who's unfortunately moving, away. No, this is my other neighbor. She's a very nice lady, and she attempted to sell the joint lot together first for several months, and, I guess the asking price wasn't working, so now they're attempting to sell it. So I'm not opposed to her making the money that she deserves over all the years she's lived there. My concerns are, having explained the lot, then it will, obviously someone will build as much as they can there. My windows face east, so it, blocks the potential sunlight from the morning and the afternoon, as well as that's our access to our backyard, the way the fences work. So it kind of encroaches on our property. Having an additional setback, I actually didn't realize that the existing house had one, so that was on my thing that I submitted. So, as a neighbor, I just wanted to come and voice that.
All right.
It's kind of a tough situation. I like my neighbor, but.
Right, right. All right. Any questions for the neighbors? No? All right. Mr. Larson, then you have the final word. Anything you'd like to say in summation? If you'd like to respond to anything that they said before we begin deliberation.
Not much. I kind of was in the same situation personally. I live in
I'm going to ask you to kind of speak into the
Yeah,
microphone. So
I was in a similar situation. I live in Evanston. Lot next to me was, for all intents and purposes, vacant, with the exception of a converted garage into a house, all the way pushed at the back of the alley, at the back by the alley. My lot was 30 by 142, so was the next door. Great big trees and all sorts of things. Our experience, a new construction eventually got built there. The lot flooded. The amount of things that got taken care of by virtue of a house being built there that conformed to the setback and the bulk requirements, has really improved, I believe, our property. So that's just an experiential thing that we have just gone through. House has been built for about 5 years there. Similarly, one just projecting into the future, that could easily happen in this particular lot. It's not the smallest lot. It's developable, and of course everything would fit with the setbacks and the bulk. And would be in keeping in character with the neighborhood, as opposed to 73 feet wide, which if that house were demolished and rebuilt, you take your side yard setbacks off and you'd have a 63-foot wide potential home, facing the front. That would definitely be out of character. So I'll just leave it at that.
I have one quick question for you. So the concrete parking pad that's off the alley, if the lots are divided, I'm assuming staff or the city would want that to be removed from the one lot rather than having this little sliver of concrete?
Correct. It would need to be removed as well as 3 feet into the lot that it exists on so that it has a compliant setback.
Right.
And I would add that I did discuss this with the owner. There's an expansion joint right in the middle of it. It might be an appropriate place just to slice it.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that you were aware that if the lot's divided, that can't live with this little sliver of concrete.
Okay.
All right. Anything else? If not, we will close the record and begin our deliberations. I'll ask for general thoughts from the commissioner.
I'll start. There are many lots in Evanston that are below the compliant dimensions. And as far as 33 feet, I mean, that's definitely buildable. Lots in Chicago, all through Chicago, are only 25 feet wide. And there's two-story buildings on that lot. So I don't see an issue there. The fact that there are other similar lots in the neighborhood, I think dividing it would be consistent with the other lots in the neighborhood. So I believe that this should be approved.
Other thoughts, Commissioner Westerberg?
I'm assuming that any structure that would be built on that lot, again, does have to follow restrictions on height, bulk, all of that, and would also be required to be in keeping with the feel of the neighborhood, or the city doesn't really weigh in on architecture at that point, correct?
The city does not dictate architectural standards, but all zoning requirements would have to be met or else variations sought.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else have anything to share? Commissioner Linville?
Sure. I am supportive of the requested variation. I would note that there are a number of, R1 lots all over the city that do not meet the 7,200 square foot lot size requirement. And I think that that's one of the things as we move forward with the comprehensive plan and the zoning rate, that situation should be looked at. I think that the one question I have for, really kind of for staff is, what are the setback requirements in the R1 for the side yards?
5 feet
5
for the
feet?
principal structure, 3 feet for accessory structures.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, so you'd have a 23-foot wide maximum building envelope without variation.
Right, and I note that staff was, suggesting that one of the things we could consider is whether or not we should provide, set any limits on future variations with respect to, I presume, new construction. Was that the notion?
You could, if you feel that separation of the zoning lot is only appropriate if re-solidifying that certain variations should not be applied for in the future. However, if you don't have conditions on it, it would still trigger variations. So
Right.
there is no presumption of approval for anyone if you don't have the condition.
Right, and probably would be easier to keep track of if that condition wasn't applied to this particular lot.
Probably.
I mean, I think anybody who purchases this lot would be made aware of the difficulties in building there, in terms of the width of the lot, the tree, these sorts of things. So all of that is out there in the public. Commissioner Mershov.
I totally agree with what my colleague said. I still want something like the wording in our decision that the 4 feet variance for the existing house is for the existing house, and that any future development in this already built lot will comply completely with the zoning ordinance. So this variance is not with the deed. It's not with the property. It's simply because we're making the splitting of the property, and it will not stay this way if a new or addition to this building is done, because this is important so that we always have this distance between building in adjacent lots. Otherwise, I would agree that this lot is completely buildable, no matter the difficulties with the trees. These are beautiful trees, by the way. I walk over there every morning. These are really, really, I would say, substantial and really nice trees, and they have to stay. But it's very buildable. And the concerns about height, we have restrictions in the zoning ordinance, so it's like any property that will be restricted in height. That's my opinion.
All right. Again, we do have a set of standards that we must find are met. These are the standards that we've gone through just moments ago. It's the same set of standards. So I will go through those, and anyone can feel free to chime in at any point. Number 1, the requested variation will not have a substantial adverse impact on the use, enjoyment, and property values of adjoining properties. We've had some discussion about the fact that these 2 lots did exist separately at one point. If they had been built upon, we would not be here because they would already be existing, grandfathered in, smaller than average R1 lots. There will be some impact on anybody because this is an empty lot, and anytime you build on an empty lot, there's going to be an impact. But even if the lots were kept together at this point and maintained that way, the house could shift and be built differently to make additions, et cetera, or a complete tear down even. I don't know if somebody would do that, but that is a possibility. So the fact that this is going to have something on it is going to impact the neighbors, but I don't believe that it's a substantial impact on them. Number 2, the requested variation is in keeping with the intent of the zoning ordinance. The zoning ordinance, as we talked about, has sort of been retrofitted into our neighborhoods. As you go through many of our neighborhoods, you find areas where lots are smaller than their approved district. You find the character of the neighborhood seems to be a little more overriding in many of these neighborhoods as opposed to what the actual zoning is. But one of the things the zoning ordinance does intend is for us to make use of our properties, and these have been 2 properties that have existed separately. Again, if we had not changed the ordinance to make a change and I think that when we look at that, I think that the intent of that was probably more so to keep people from purchasing a smaller lot and then dividing it up, so you have a 2,500 square foot lot and a 8,000 square foot lot, and you want to divide that into two very small lots. These lots have kind of existed, so I believe that that standard is met. The alleged hardship or practical difficulty is peculiar to the property. Again, going to the fact that in 1960, when we changed the zoning ordinance, there were some rules put in place about adjoining properties that were held in common ownership and keeping them as one. But we've seen that this particular homeowner has always kind of treated these as two separate properties. There's never been a move to merge the two properties into one. And even though there was discussion that the current owner did try to sell them as such, as one lot, there was no motion on that. And so I do think that we find these areas where there are lots that are a little unusual, and to try to ask people to keep them together in perpetuity seems a little unfair to me. Number 4, the property owner would suffer a particular hardship or practical difficulty as distinguished from a mere inconvenience if the strict letter of the regulations were carried out. Again, just kind of reiterating what I've said, these two particular lots have sort of been established as separate individual lots and have been treated as such and maintained as such. And there is no reason that I believe that the particular hardship that this owner would have, I mean, we've seen trying to sell the property as one. It's out of character with the neighborhood, which means the price of the property is probably much higher, which would create additional problems for the owner. So I believe that standard is met. Number 5, the purpose of the variation is not based exclusively upon a desire to extract additional income from the property, or if it does, there will be a public benefit. This one for me is a little bit kind of a gray area because obviously there will be additional income generated by selling 2 lots as opposed to 1 lot. But because the lots are also smaller, it does provide for smaller housing to be built on that second lot, which is one of the city's goals. And so although I'm a little in the gray on the additional income, I think that the public benefit of having a buildable smaller lot for a smaller house does benefit the city and therefore allows this standard to be met. Number 6, the alleged difficulty or hardship has not been created by any person having an interest in the property. Again, we've sort of heard that these two properties were purchased at separate times. I believe that based on the dates that I had written down, it was after we had changed our zoning ordinance. But this is kind of an unusual rule in zoning. And so I don't think that this particular owner purchased the second lot with the intent to immediately sell it off or anything like that. They'd been held in common ownership for something like 47 years. And so I don't think that this situation is, if anything, the city has kind of created this hardship for this particular owner, blaming the city. And number 7, the requested variation requires the least deviation from the applicable regulation among the feasible options identified. I'll just say this, that if we were looking at the lots being divided differently than the way they have always been established, I think I would view this a little differently. But since there has always been a 40-foot lot and always been a 33-foot lot, the fact that that is the way we're being asked to divide these seems to make sense to me. And therefore, I believe that is the minimum required. If we were to create one standard lot that were 50 feet wide, we would then end up with this very small little sliver of land that couldn't be used for much of anything, and even dividing them equally would create more problems because of the way the house is currently situated on the one property. So they are maintaining the setback as it was required at the time the house was built, even though any future development, if something were to happen to that house, would be required to build under our current zoning, which would be the 5-foot. Is everyone in agreement with my findings on the standards?
Yes.
And are there any conditions that anyone would like to discuss?
Just adding the one about the concrete pad.
I think the other would be
Is your mic on?
And the other would be that the side yard variance that exists does not apply to the, we're approving that existing 4-foot side, but that, we're not approving it for the other lots.
Right. Right. Anything on the new lot would have to meet all standards as they currently, or all setbacks as they currently exist. And obviously, when we get into, if something is built there, it will come to us probably because of the tree. I don't imagine they'll get something sold and built before June, but, so yes, that will all be addressed probably at a future meeting if something is built that needs variations. With that, I will ask if there is a motion.
Sure. I move approval of the major variations for 2420 and 2422 Grant Street, 23 ZMJV-0054 to allow one zoning lot to be converted into two zoning lots based on the existing tax parcels, with an interior side yard setback of 4 feet where 5 feet is required for 2420 Grant Street. And the removal, subject to a condition that the existing parking pad be reduced in size to comply with the required 3-foot interior side yard setback for 2420 Grant, in order to, convey 2420 as a completely vacant lot.
All right.
Set. Did I do it right?
Yep. Is there a second?
What? Oh,
I mean,
No,
we
we
can
did.
mention it, it will always, I mean, we can put it in, that's fine. It will come to us anyway, because that is the new law.
but I
Just the fact
mentioned
that
the
our
one
approval
on the
doesn't-
2420, the existing 4-foot is just for the 20.
Just for that, you did. Okay,
Yes.
sorry.
All right.
I'll second.
Been moved by Lindwall, seconded by Westerberg. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, if you would please call the roll.
Commissioner Halleck? Yes. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Linwall?
Yes,
Commissioner Mudinchev?
Yes.
Commissioner Pucktell?
Yes.
Commissioner Westerberg?
Yes.
Chair Rogers?
Yes, so with a vote of 7-0, the motion carries, and the division of the property is is approved. So good luck with your project. We will probably be hearing more about this case later, as a new project is being built on the vacant lot that will be sold off.
although I would hope that a compliant house can be built that preserves the oak tree and that we do not have to hear it again.
Right. All right, that concludes the two cases we had on the agenda this evening. I will go to communications, and I know Commissioner Westerberg had mentioned a communication that she wanted to raise.
So this question, I'm not quite sure who the question can really go to. Ms. Flax, it may be for you. We ran into this issue before where the commission had approved a project with certain conditions. When the project went to either the Planning and Development Committee or the council, city staff had removed one of the conditions. And I think following that situation, it had to do with the Masonic Temple renovation. But I had asked whether it was possible to simply let commissioners know when a condition is either being removed or not recommended, just so we're aware of it. So the plan development, which was for South Boulevard, which went to Planning and Development, had as one of its conditions adding the required off-street loading berth. And apparently this was with Planning and Development Committee, that Planning and Development decided that that was not necessary, which of course is their privilege. But that city staff felt that there would be a better way to provide for that loading zone within the parking area and the Hinman Avenue extension that went to the south end of that lot. So my question is simply, is it possible to let us know when these changes are made, just so we're not caught by surprise when we look at a development that gets approved and it's like, well, now that's strange because I thought we had a condition that we had added in.
I think that's a very reasonable request, and we will certainly do that going forward. I apologize that we haven't done that.
If, I have a question though, if this change was done by Planning and Development or City Council, in the moment, in their meeting, how would we get notified?
Well, you're right. I mean, that we can, if they're discussing it, there's not much we can do. But I believe from the minutes, and I'm just going from the minutes for Planning and Development, that it was staff made very clear that this was a condition from the commission, but that you also felt that there was a more effective way to do this. And again, if you know that going in, and if that's part of the presentation of Planning and Development, that's where it would be helpful to know. I realize you have no control whatsoever over what's discussed, so understood, and I'm not concerned with that.
Is the objection, just to clarify, is the objection that staff went against our recommendation and had a different solution that they presented?
My objection is not that staff would have a different recommendation. They're going to, and I'm not surprised. But if it is a condition we voted on and approved, it would just be helpful to know about that beforehand.
I think that's absolutely reasonable, and we can certainly do that.
Any other communications, Commissioner Halleck?
Yeah, my usual, but I have to say that it's been months and months, maybe over a year since the first comprehensive plan RFP went out, and we ask about this, I ask about it at least every month, I think, and it's always, no, not yet, not yet. Now, we're hearing cases, we just went through 3 weeks of intensive debate. It seems every time we hear a case, it says to me that why don't we have this? And it's getting to the point to me whether, maybe we shouldn't even bother. Maybe, just let everything go, because it's becoming very urgent. And if we're not going to do it now, when are we going to do it? 5 years from now? I just don't understand, and I'm getting a little upset with the excuse that, well, we just don't have time.
We will be submitting a application for a HUD grant, which is a unique HUD grant, never been offered before, which is to get funds to help remove barriers to housing production and affordable housing preservation. This was an initiative of actually it started being discussed when Obama was president, that this stuff had to be done, but it was really moved forward under the Biden administration and by HUD Secretary Marcia Fudge. That came up. We discussed it with the mayor and Luke, and we do not have the capacity to work full bore on both things. It will be submitted by the 6th of November, and we will be moving full bore on the comprehensive plan. We are working on it, but not as fast as we want to.
I thought the grant was due October 30th. Have they extended the deadline?
It was extended by a week due to technical difficulties, as we understand it, with the system but gives us a little more time to integrate all of the input we received. We've received great deal of input, including from some of you. Thank you. And that is actually one of the, it's one of the criteria. They look at the criterion they look at for, did you engage your community? It's an interesting grant because they are not looking for communities that are going, maybe we ought to start thinking about this. It's for communities that have been trying to get to this, and one of the things we are doing is our comprehensive plan commitment as part of our leveraging. We are showing we are already very committed to moving forward on this. So I'm hoping that it is a serendipitous and that we will, it is a very competitive grant. We are not going to, but so is their NSP2 grant. It is nationwide, so we're up against all kinds of organizations, but we are also an opportunity area because they're looking at communities that have a great deal to offer people who are lower income but are not able to either produce or develop the or preserve the housing that they need for them.
So I want to pin you down a little bit because I understand what you just said, but this is submitted on November 6th. Then what happens? How long do we have to wait before we see any action on the comprehensive plan?
We will kick in full bore in January. We are working behind the scenes on all the early scheduling and all that stuff and the outreach.
And that
planning.
hasn't been being done all this time
Some
that
of
we've
it
been
has
waiting?
been. Some of it has been, but it's been a very slow start.
May I suggest that it would be very helpful for us to get an update as to kind of what your thinking is about the comprehensive plan and the work program before you have something even formal to present, maybe in December, if not.
We'll see. Part of it is when we take things to our city council too. And so
does this
we're
have to
working on
go,
all
so
that.
does the work program have to go to the city council before it comes to us? I mean,
There is no set process that has to be followed for this. And one of the things that is very important is that we have all of our council members on board, as well on board as all of you. And that's what we're looking to do.
Board with what?
How we move forward and with our community outreach and our engagement is the primary
So
thing.
the work plan has to be approved by city council?
No, it won't be approved by city council officially, but we have not decided, we haven't set how we're going to bring our next steps out to
And
public.
Does that communication with councils pass us by, or do we?
We
are
haven't
part
planned
of
that yet. We really have to look at all that, okay?
well, I'd
I
like,
promise you, we will get to work on it.
The annoyance, as you can imagine, is that every time we bring this up, it's like, well, yeah, next month, last summer, this fall, now it's January, and I'm no offense, but I'm not. I wouldn't be surprised if come January you say, well, it'll be March. So I mean, this has to be a priority to me.
Yes, I understand your frustration. I have plenty of frustrations about it as well, because we are understaffed pretty severely, and we have had major cases. You know, I don't think we've had a case that's taken up as much between the school, the stadium, the Margarita Inn. You all know what that took from Land Use Commission. I mean, I would wish all those were underway and developed, but not yet.
Are there job postings published that are specifically designed to help with a comprehensive plan?
We have requested a new position in the 2024 budget, and we are finalizing, we have gotten approval to post what was a planner position as a senior planner position to get additional bandwidth for that. But the position that's in the budget is a supervisory position for planning and policy development. So that's what we're working on getting.
I'd just like to suggest, since we are the Land Use Commission, and our, part of our purview is making sure that whatever plan developments, whatever applications we're considering are consistent with a comprehensive plan. And I think that it would be very helpful to have a discussion about what your thoughts are on the work program and the plan moving forward in terms of community engagement, because at the end of the day, I mean, that's kind of our function and role. And I think that that could happen, you know, either before, you know, I don't know that necessarily it has to wait until you've had conversations with all the council members. I think that I would hope that our input would be helpful for the discussion.
Absolutely, and we'll be in touch, I promise.
I'm going to make a suggestion because I don't know who, I mean, there are 9 of us. I don't think we're equally divided among the wards, but I would say also to contact your council members and let them know how much this is impacting our work. I mean, I don't want to ask staff because I don't want to put staff in the question. It's better for us to go straight to council because they don't need to be in the middle of this. And I don't know if all of the council members know how important this is to what we do. So I would make a recommendation that we reach out to our individual council members and just say, look, this is impacting what we're able to do on land use. This needs to become a priority for the council, and that they need to understand how important this is to making things function in the city.
We would welcome that support.
All right. Any other communications from staff to us? No. Finally, the public comment, I will note for the record that there is nobody in the room with us. So there's no one here to provide public comment. And therefore, I will ask if there is a motion to adjourn till our meeting on November 8th at 7 p.m.
I move a motion to adjourn.
It's been moved by Lindwall. Is there a second? Seconded by Halleck. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
We do stand adjourned at 8:12.